and with Healthy Minds and Better Lives. And we've had Rachel Jenkins on discussing her book. We will be putting the details up of the event that she's got going on in Newport. I still have Hayley T. Wheeler with me. Thank you for staying up and staying on the show. It's been a pleasure. We were, as we said, people are struggling now with, the cost of living and everything else. So, you went on to, with the practical side of it, making sure that they've got the right benefits and the right people where they can, deal with the practical side of looking after the family or themselves. But in amongst all that, how can they do perhaps little things to help with their own anxiety and their own worries and their own pressures?
There's lots of different things to be done, and as I think we've said through the programme, haven't we, that not everything is going to work for everyone, and it
No.
really is about finding the unique things that suit you and your lifestyle. And one of the things that I think is very underutilized is breathing. It really is important and very useful and beneficial and free.
That's even better.
It really is. But excuse me. Being able to get into practice deep breathing when you do feel anxious, or I'm practicing breathing all the time, but it really is helpful when you feel anxious, when anxiety is at its highest, or you're feeling really stressed. And I know people think, it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything when I'm breathing, but actually you'd be surprised at how calm your body can become by deep breathing. But it does need to be a skill that you practice and practice and practice when you're not feeling anxious, to be able to use it when you are feeling anxious. And I think maybe this feels like a big thing for people to consider. A lot of people, and I know this became very, very apparent very, very quickly in early 2020 when we went into lockdown, was that there was a lot of things that were out of our control.
Yes.
And people tried to control the things out of our control. If you're going to do one thing every day, focus on what you can control. Because the more you focus on what you can't, it just becomes more and more stressful. So, for example, if you consider lockdown, there was nothing we could do about what the government decided to do, but there was a lot we could do within our own homes in terms of how we spent our time, what we did in terms of focusing on things. And I think that becomes again, another important skill to learn. Focus on what you can control. What can you change? What can you adapt? What can you amend? What can you do today for yourself, rather than focusing on all these big things that you have no hope of changing?
And you have no control over. I must admit, I had to shield over the lockdown, and I did get to a stage where I found it very difficult, because it was like, I'm a little bit of a rebel anyway, and it was like being told, no, you can't do this. As much as I knew why and I understood why, and I, thought, well, yeah, I've got to be safe, it was still that kind of, well, somebody's telling me I can't do it. And because it was being pushed all the time, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, it began to get to me a lot more. Because normally I'm somebody, well, if I can't do anything about it, let's just wait and see what happens. But with this, because it was a simple thing like going to the shops, I couldn't go to the shops, and it really did start to affect me. And that was when I started thinking, hang on, I'm looking at the, fact that I'm being controlled. I'm being told what to do. And because I'm somebody that kind of goes, well, you tell me not to do it, I'm going to kind of try and do it anyway. That I found very, very difficult.
But it's about them focusing on, in terms of some of the things that I focused on with my children, were what I ate, my vitamin intake, all the things around my health, our health as a family, that's what I took control of. And instead of spending hours and hours and hours watching, my dad spends lots of time watching the news. I didn't watch the news. I focused on what I needed to do for us as a family to be healthy, look after ourselves, to protect ourselves, to just be healthier in general. And I think it can be very easy to get caught up in all those big things that feel so oppressive and sometimes even crushing. But if you break down all the things, the little things that you can control, I'm not saying it's easy, it just gets a little bit easier. There is a difference between easy and easier, but
Yes.
it's about where you choose to put your focus. And I think it's the choice element that people struggle with.
Yeah. Because again, it's going back to we're used to helping other people.
We are.
So when you're in a situation where the only people you can help, and it gets to a point where they don't need your help anymore, is family or whatever, then you start looking at, well, hang on, I've got to try and help myself now. What do I do?
Well, if we, as I think I've said this, earlier on in the show, if we learn the skill and the art of self-protection, self-knowledge, self-understanding, self-compassion, all those things are skills to learn. And it's funny because we don't learn them.
No.
There's nowhere along our lives that people stop us and teach us those skills. So it's up to us really to practice those skills so that we can operate at the best version of ourselves. And I think if you can get somebody who can support you with that, amazing. But there are ways that you can look at doing that yourself. As I said earlier, it's not easy, but it is possible. And I think once you find the right resources, the right people, whatever whatever works for you, by using all those things, your life does become easier.
So where would somebody start? I think we touched on this before because, you know, it's where do I start? Yes, I'm being told I need to do this, but how do I start? Where do I start? What do I start with?
I think nowadays we're very lucky. I think the likes of social media and all these different platforms we have access to, there's benefits, there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to them. But there's, in terms of free resources, if you want to go and start the self-help journey, YouTube is a wonderful place to start. There's lots of videos on there. There's lots of people on there, lots of resources on there to help you with mindset, with focus, with goal setting. It's a free, and this is really important in a time when we have our own challenges and struggles. Having something free and accessible is great. Then it's about deciding where you want to go with whatever it is you want to achieve. Where do you want to go with that? And then it's accessing the different resources. Whether it's, are you great at self-help? Can you pick up a book and will it help you and will it take you where you want to go? Or do you need that person to guide you? Do you need that person to teach you? Do you need that person to support you and coach you? So it depends really on what kind of person you are. I've got an online program, that a version of my program. People don't like the online version because of the emotional side, which is fine. They need to work directly with somebody, which is
Yeah.
great. And when you know the difference in who you are and what works for you, you make better choices.
And becomes, we're back to the easier, becomes easier to actually sort of work on yourself then. Because, sometimes, yeah, as you said, the emotional side of it can be, is obviously different for everybody. You've got somebody that can deal with the emotional side, and then you've got somebody that, no, I don't want to let that emotional side out.
It's tough. It's a really tough journey. The journey I take clients through, I tell them at the start, before we even start working together, is going to be hard.
Yeah.
Because we are learning a new skill, and that skill is getting to the root of the problem. Something Rachel mentioned earlier. You have to get to the root of any problem, whether it's mental health, whether it's a problem in work, whether it's a technical problem, whatever the problem is. Unless you get to the root of the problem, then it's going to keep coming back.
That's the hard part, is the root of the problem.
It
Because
is, but
that's, does it take, I mean obviously, it would take different people at different amounts of time to get to that root of the problem. And for some people, obviously, I would assume talking about it is very, very difficult. What would you say to those people that do find the talking side about it that difficult?
Well, this is where, as we've talked about tonight, having access to different modalities and different ways of working is really important. My program is very much a step-by-step guide, whereas counselling is going into a room and speaking about, the stuff that you're going through at the moment. So it depends on whether you're able to just go in a room and open up, or whether you need somebody to hold your hand through a step-by-step guide. Neither one is right or wrong. It's
No.
just what's good for you. And for me, the clients that I work with, adults in particular, they take 3 months to get to the root of the problem, to release emotions, to get to the point where they are back in control of their life. And I think that's part of anxiety in particular, depression as well. They really make you feel like you have no control over your life.
And is it the same with, we're hearing, sadly, a lot more of younger people suffering with, mental health problems, anxiety, and depression. Um, how difficult is it for them?
Do you know, right? I work with, my youngest client was 5, my eldest has been 80, and they struggle with the same challenges. But the children and the adolescents, they absolutely love it. They get it far quicker than the adults.
Is
Because
that
children,
because? Go on, sorry, carry on,
well, I was
Hayley.
going to say, children are primed to learn, aren't they? And when children come, they're not quite as afraid of their emotions as adults are. So they are really keen to find out what is going on. So when you start giving them the answers and then they start discovering things about themselves, they are amazing at the journey. They just thoroughly thrive throughout the whole process.
You've actually answered what I was going to say. Is it because they're younger, and whereas people that are older, they are. I don't say we're stuck in our emotions, but it's what we've learnt to use throughout our lives and what we've taught sometimes ourselves.
Mm.
How to deal with things. But is it because they're younger and they haven't got that?
I think they're so keen to find the answers, which adults aren't always as keen to find the answers, mainly because they believe, or they've come to believe, bad things about themselves, whereas children aren't always at that point yet. So I'm a 6-year-old boy I worked with. He was one of my first clients. He came and just truly didn't understand why he was behaving the way he was behaving. And the first session, it was the session prior to even starting the program. He went home and he told his grandparents exactly what I told him, because he was so excited to understand there was nothing wrong with him, that actually all these things that happened in his life had created this behavior with him. So he was so excited to tell people that, if you do this and you understand this and you know this about yourself and you do this, he was like
Oh,
amazed at
that's
everything.
amazing.
And oh, Ron, it's so lovely a job to have. I love my job.
You can actually tell how much you love your job with the way you speak, and it's such a nice thing to hear. It's you seem to live with your clients in the sense of each step of their journey. You want to be involved with it. It's not just a job.
No, and I think because having been there, having been in that really dark place, I went through it myself by choice. I didn't ask for help, and I did get a little bit of help along the way, but that was by choice. I don't want to see people do it on their own. I want to be able to help them through it, because I know how difficult it was doing it on my own. It took me 3 years to do what I do with clients in 3 months. I battled 8 years altogether, but in order, from the minute that dark thought happened, that devastating thought, it took me 3 years to get better. So I don't want people to go through 3 years. I want them to do it in that 3 months and then to be able to live a life that they deserve.
And it's just so refreshing to hear, because sometimes you read about the different people that do different things, and sometimes you think, well, are they doing it because they care, or are they doing it because, well, it's a job that brings the money in? So for people that are listening in, that are in that dark place, for them to hear you say, yes, I want to go through this journey with you, or, how how many people like you are out there?
I'd like to think there's more than we know about, and I think if we go with that, there's a lot of services out there that work, and they genuinely do it from the heart. There'll be more people out there, and my aim is to license the program to be able to get more people to do this work as well, because it's so important. Your mental health is, well, as I said earlier, you are the most important person in your world. So if we can get your mental health right, everything else falls into place. It's really surprising how integral mental health is to everything.
And it is such a big, is devastation the right word, when it does fail, when the mental health side of it fails, and you are at that point, and it is a devastation, as you say. It is a dark place, and to come out from that is, get through to the other side is amazing anyway, but to actually make that first step has got to be probably one of the biggest challenges.
It is, because you feel so lost in life. And the one thing I do want, if you walk away with anything tonight, I hope it's you're the most important person in the world. And the next thing would be, it really is possible. There is so many things you don't know about yourself and you don't understand about yourself. And once you start to understand those things and you start to know those things about yourself, and you get so familiar with yourself that nobody can tell you anything you don't know about yourself, that's life-changing.
And it's, what would you say to somebody that goes, well, yes, I know I'm the most important thing. I know I'm this amazing person, but I don't feel it. And how am I going to break through that if I can't believe it anyway?
I have a lot of people who tell me that they don't think my program's going to work, because they listen to the words, they can hear the words I'm saying, but they just have no faith that it's going to work. But if you have a car and you put water in the engine rather than petrol or diesel, let's say it's a diesel car, and you put water in the engine, it's not going to work.
No.
And I think that's something that the education system has been doing to us, really. It teaches us things that we need to understand about the world of work. And we go and do all those things, and we go to university, we go to college, it teaches us all the special stuff that we need to know about specific jobs. But nobody teaches us about ourselves. So when you learn about yourself, you will start to believe those things. But there's things you don't understand yet that sort of underlies why you don't understand and believe those things about yourself.
So do you think it should be sort of talked about more in school, even perhaps taught about in schools? And is it even feasible?
I think it should be talked about more everywhere.
Well, yeah.
However, what I'm worried about and what I see too much of is that things are a tick box exercise. So people get given a role and a title and told to do the job, but they don't get the right training to be able to do that job. And I've seen that in schools where a teacher 1 week was telling the children, if you don't wear a mask, you're going to kill Granny. But then the next week was saying, well, I'm your mental health advocate. So if you need anything, and that just,
That
you
doesn't sit
can't.
right. No.
Well, this is the thing, when you said earlier about how do you reach out, okay? So many people, when they're struggling with their mental health, with anxiety, depression, and they are trying to reach out, they are looking at people and trying to figure out if they are trustworthy enough to reach out to them. Is this person the person I can say to, I feel awful, I'm anxious and I'm struggling? So they're kind of testing the water constantly. May just be watching, but they may ask questions, or they may be listening to what you're saying. They may say things that try and get a reaction out of you, just to see if you are that person that they can trust, because you feel so vulnerable, and reaching out to somebody who might reject you is an awful thought. So people are testing the water with you. So when you've got somebody who is saying that one thing this week and then telling you I'm the mental health advocate the next week, you are not the person I'm going to reach out to.
No. So but is it feasible? Could it be done? I mean, in schools?
I don't see
You
why
know,
not. If you've got the right training and you're not doing it for a tick box exercise, it absolutely can be done in schools. But it can be done. So my method is about supporting you first and then being able to support others. Because if you don't know how to look after yourself, how can you genuinely look after other people? And this is
oh,
something we've said a
that
couple of
yeah,
times.
that is a good question, because when you are helping other people, you do believe that you are giving the best of yourself to help them.
But if you really assess that, are you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is a thought, because if you are somebody, that does help people and prefers to help people rather than yourself, which, as you said, quite a lot of people are like that. To you think or you feel that, yes, I'm doing the right thing and I'm helping this person. But as you say, when you sort of break it down, you think, well, am I helping them because I can't help myself? Or could I help them better if I helped myself?
Oh, that is a turnaround. I like the way you think. I think that's important, isn't it? Because yes, it's helping people. No matter what state you're in, you can always help somebody.
Yeah.
Whether it's just picking something up for somebody or being kind to somebody, you can always do those things that's going to make somebody else's day a little bit better. But what tends to happen with people who are vulnerable and who are struggling themselves, they will overly give. So there'll be no boundaries. There'll be no, yes, I can do it today, but I can't do it tomorrow because I'm busy. There will always be yes, 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 regardless of what's going on. So sometimes it gets to a point where you become resentful of that person for asking you to do things. But actually, it's about you and your boundaries. And we're saying all these things with the understanding that when you're struggling, it's very hard to set boundaries. And that's another skill to learn if you've never learned how to set boundaries. And I know, I talk a lot about skill development because that's really important. There's so many things that we go to school, we go to college, we go to university. Somebody shakes us off and say, go and do life, go and
Yeah.
live. What does live mean? What does happiness mean? What does success mean? And we've got all these undefined things that we are trying to achieve. But until you know yourself, you can't really truly define those in order to work towards them. So we
And the
need,
thing is, yeah, as you say, you've got all these things, but as well as that, you're heading towards these things that you don't really know which one, because everybody's got a different level of what their measure of success is, what their measure of happiness is, what their measure of, what life is supposed to be. Everybody's got such different ideas. Does it
well, let me,
boil down to one or two things?
it doesn't really, because they are yours to define. So if there is anybody listening out there who has a definition of happiness, and I love this question because it challenges people all the time. We will talk about happiness, but what is your definition? How do you define happiness? What does it mean to you? What does it feel like to you? What does it look like to you?
Comment with us on Facebook. Comment with us on YouTube, Twitter, whatever else we're on. That's an interesting one because as you were asking, I'm thinking, well, hang on, what is my definition? And is that really happiness, or is that just something I like? Or is that something that makes me feel good, but it's not actually making me feel ecstatically good, which I suppose for me is probably what happiness should be.
And there is no right or wrong. And I think this is really important. There is no right or wrong. There is no, when we say we're struggling, there's no level or marker for struggling. If you're struggling, you're struggling. You don't have to be, suicidal at suicidal point to ask for help. If you've just realised I'm really struggling financially, I'm struggling emotionally, if you've been 10 minutes struggling, now's the time to ask if you realised it. And I think that's really important, that with things like happiness, success, living, what life looks like, there really is no right or wrong answer.
Because everybody's so different.
Everybody is so different, and that's what makes us all amazing human beings.
And that also, I suppose, adds its own problems in with how different people deal with the problems that they're struggling with.
Absolutely. Again, we all have a different perception of things, don't we?
Yeah. It's one of those things that you sort of sit and you think, well, yeah, I'm struggling. Do I really need help yet?
That's another thing. As I was saying earlier, I think a lot of us think I have to be struggling a certain amount before I ask for help. But if we could get to prevention, that would be amazing. But I think we're a little way off that yet.
Yeah, I think we might be.
But if we can get to a point where, do you know what? The minute you realise you're struggling, that's the time to say, okay, maybe if we realised a week in, a month in, I'm struggling, would we need all the extra support if we waited until we were 3 years in? I look back at my own journey. If I'd have said in 2010, I'm struggling, would I have had to have gone to that point where that dark, devastating thought would I have got to that point? Would I have needed to get to that point? And as I say, I'm very grateful for having had depression. And I know this is quite a tough concept for a lot of people, but had I not gone through the battle of getting to the other side of depression, I would not be the person I am today. And I wouldn't have learned all the things I know about myself today if I hadn't gone through that. So I genuinely am glad and grateful for having gone through it. Wouldn't want to go there again, learn my
No.
lessons, but it's taught me amazing skills, amazing things about myself that I just wouldn't have. There's no other lesson that could have taught me that.
That is pretty amazing. And I think you've got to be the first person I've ever heard say that, they were grateful for it because it made such a huge difference.
It's changed my life completely. It's changed me as a person. It's changed me as a parent. It's changed me completely in a good way. But not necessarily depression itself, but learning about depression and myself and learning all those ways and not doing the medication. The self-development side has been absolutely, I've said this 3 times now, but it's been life-changing for me.
But that, the thing is, it doesn't matter how many times you say it because it shows that it has made that difference to you, and anybody listening in, hopefully can hear that in your voice and feel, well, hang on, if it's made that difference to her, maybe, I can feel like that eventually. Absolutely. We're going to take a little break, Hayley, if that's okay with you. And then we will come back for the last however many minutes of the show it is, and maybe sort of just recap over the show and how people perhaps can, go online and see what you do, and what your step-by-step guide is and things like that, if that's okay.
Fab.
I shall join you in a minute.
Download the Pure West Radio